Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers and this is
Ivy.
So, I had an exciting weekend in West Virginia again, surprisingly. For it being West Virginia, we went down and we were looking into the Flatwoods Monster incident. And so we went down to Braxton County, which is where Flatwoods is located. It is the tiniest shithole that you've ever seen in your entire life. But then again, that is literally the entire state of West Virginia. But we went down there. We did all the touristy things. You know, we went to the museum. They have these like big chairs that you can go and like if you locate all 5 chairs around the town and you take a picture with them, you go back to the museum and you get like a free sticker. So it's kind of a fun game, and you know, we did all that. There was a bunch of us there. But I mean, we really had a great time. You know, we had a lot of fun. Really, the first full day there, we just kind of, you know, fucked off. We just kind of did whatever we wanted. But, you know, it really got us in the mood to, you know, do some genuine monster hunting. But, you know, we went down to the sighting area, like where it actually happened at, which is kind of hard. Because right outside of where the sighting happened at, we were really confused about where it was exactly that they saw this monster. And there's like a chair kind of located in that area, and then like kind of where it is, there's this ice cream place, and it's called The Spot. And so we're like looking around and we're like, but right behind it's like these woods, and we're like, okay, so did it happen right here and that's why they have an ice cream place called The Spot because it's The Spot? Or is it further back? And so we had to kind of go a little bit and use our context clues, because there's nowhere that says that it's, you know, where exactly it happened. And, you know, we had to kind of do our own little research and figure it out, but we did, and it is private property, so I'm not going to disclose where, but it's there. But no, it was a lot of fun. The girl at the museum, you know, I asked her, some young girl working there, and I asked her, you know, do you believe that the monster happened? And she said that she lives next to one of the guys that was there, and, you know, he still maintains to this day that it's a real story. And so, you know.
And when did this happen exactly?
This happened in 1952. It was September 12th. But we'll get into the meat of that in a moment. But yeah, so we went down there, and, you know, and then of course we spent, you know, some time in Point Pleasant. We met this wonderful old hippie lady named Kathy, and I'm supposed to go and have wine with her. But she's great. She works for the Historical Society, and so she's going to help kind of piece together, because Anne's been investigating like all of the history of Point Pleasant, and she's finding some huge missing pieces of time. And you know, so we're trying to kind of figure that out and figure out what happened during those missing time periods and things like that. And Kathy seems to kind of be the key to that. So we're gonna, you know, meet with her and do that and whatever. And then of course Tanya Derenberger has now gotten hold of me, and she is now going to be a part of the documentary as well. So it's going. It's fast. It is going so fast, but it's going. And then we're going to try to go down this weekend, and I'm not sure what we're going to accomplish. I kind of think I know what I want to do while I'm down there. But that's just kind of the way this documentary is rolled. It's just wherever it takes me, you know. I just kind of go down there and figure something out, and then kind of follow that lead and see where it goes, because, I mean, that's kind of what it's about. So anyway, but it was great. Like I said, we learned a lot, and I'm excited to go back, and it was nice to have all hands on deck. It was nice to have, you know, multiple people with multiple cameras and things like that. We got a lot of footage, a lot of fun stuff, so I'm excited. But, you know, before we got into this week's episode, which, you know, I thought fittingly we would talk about the Flatwoods Monster, you know, I wanted to kind of take some time out and talk about, today is the 1-year anniversary of the Oregon District shooting that happened here in Dayton, Ohio. And I remember that on that day, I got this weird wild hair up my ass, and I was kind of going around town visiting everybody, and like, I made like a big Facebook post about it. I'm like, I'm gonna go visit everybody, hit me up. And I was just, jumping around, house jumping all day long. It's something I like to do sometimes, and trying to see as many people in one day as I can. And the last people I was supposed to go see, usually I go and I meet them at this bar that's across the street from my house. Well, that same night, they happened to not actually be at that bar. They were down in the Oregon district, and which is probably about 10-minute drive from my house, and maybe 20. And of course, they invited me to go down there, and I did not. I didn't go down there. And then I get home, and I sit down and I log into Facebook, and people are talking about how there's an active shooter down there, and everybody's freaking out. But you were actually down there at the Oregon district when this happened, right? You were actually,
Well, I work down there too, so.
Right.
It's like everybody kind of knows everybody, and like after work, everybody goes out to the different bars, like if they work in the restaurants or the shops or whatever.
I guess we should explain that the Oregon, because people that don't live here don't know, the Oregon district is like a strip, that's downtown Dayton, basically.
And it's like 3 or 4 blocks long.
Yeah, and it's got all different bars and restaurants, and there's tattoo shops and sex shops. It's just a little area that you go down to.
Technically a whole like neighborhood. It's a historical neighborhood, so it's like more than just
that
the
strip.
But that's what
people are talking about.
For.
Yeah, when people are talking about the Oregon district, that's usually what they're talking about is, down there. And so, but you went out. You went out that night for drink. Did you work that day? Do you remember?
I did actually, and it was honestly work was really weird because at this time, like before COVID and all that, like I would pull like a tarot card before every shift, and in the morning I pulled a card that was 10 of Swords, and I actually shared it on my Facebook today because it came up as a memory. But on the card, it's like this, it's like behind an angel that's like walking through this gateway, and it's the 10 of Swords. So it's like 10 people actually died that night.
Yeah,
if you include the shooter. But even weirder than that, I was outside on smoke break, and like my coworker was out there with me, and out of nowhere this feather like came floating down, and like everybody there knows I'm weird. Obviously I pull a tarot card for every shift. They know I'm fucking weird. So when I seen this feather, I'm like, a blessing. And like I caught it, and like he was just kind of like looking at me like, what the fuck. But like, well, and feathers are like they signify like protection or being watched over by angels. And so that whole thing was weird. And like at the time, like I didn't know what any of it meant. Like, I mean, I did in regards to like the work environment. I would kind of use those cards.
Well, and what does 10 of Swords mean?
10 of Swords, like in traditional terms of like the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, it's pictured with a guy laying on the ground, and there's 10 swords in his back. So it's about death. It's about letting things go, the ending and the beginning. So it's like that. Like 9s are completion, so it's like the completion of that cycle. Whereas 10s, because it's a 1 and a 0, it's like, okay, this is the transition from that ending to the beginning. That weird gray area of like, okay, this is over now. This is a new cycle, and it's that transition.
And it can be a pretty unforgiving card. I in my personal experience, I'm always like, uh-oh.
Like some sense about
it's
to
rough.
go down.
Right, it's rough,
and, I, like, when I would pull the cards for the shift, it would just kind of, like, be something for us to focus on as, like,
a team.
Co-workers and, being a team. And, like, for that, it was just kind of like, things could get stressy today. Just keep your cool. Make sure, like, if you need help, you ask for help. Make sure you're offering help when you have time. Yada, 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 yada.
Did it that day? Do you remember?
It did. It was a little hectic.
But it was like, what, Saturday night, Friday night, Saturday night?
I can't even remember now. But it was hectic enough that I remembered I didn't draw a card for dinner shift.
Okay.
So,
the 10 of Swords was enough.
Right. And, back then I was, like, working doubles all the time. So, like, I didn't necessarily always get to do one for lunch and one for dinner. It just kind of depends on the flow. But
Right.
So anyway, me and all my coworkers go out, and I was actually trying to think of like who all was there, because it was more than just me and my coworkers, and I'm almost certain there was 10 people, and
Okay.
that in itself is weird because none of those people were hurt. So it was just weird. Like me and my best friend Jean were at one bar, and we were going to catch up with everybody else because they like to go to this bar that's transphobic, and me and her are both trans.
Right.
And my coworkers don't really always understand that. I kind of voiced myself about that, and I get where the confusion comes in, and so I don't hold it against anybody, but it's also not like the most comfortable place for me as a person to be,
Right.
even though I'm accepted in that environment because all of those people know me,
Right.
but they don't know Jean.
Right.
And so it was a really weird situation. But we were at one bar, and the guy that actually did the shooting came up and talked to us, and obviously we didn't know who he was.
Right.
But he was like, he was trying to like segue his way into our conversation. And down there, like, you can get any kind of weirdo. There's
Right.
homeless people that hang out on the
All kinds of
streets.
people.
There's
It's
street
Dayton.
performers that are great at what they do. There's also people that think they're street performers and they're just drunk and just rude and nasty. Stuff is like pretty much always going on down
Right.
there. So like, you're kind of mindful of like who you engage with. So like me and Jean, being trans and it being, a cis community predominantly, we kind of keep to ourselves, but not necessarily. And he, we weren't receptive to him, and he eventually got the hint, and like he went inside, and then
Was he being cordial? Was he being nice?
it wasn't like he was being nasty or anything. He was just like
Trying to talk
he was
to
just
you
weird,
and
honestly.
weren't interested.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was very spacey and just like trying to do small talk, and it's like me and Jean were in the middle of a conversation that had nothing to do with what this guy was trying to talk about. So it was more of an annoyance on our part than anything. But so he goes inside, and like he's in there for a few minutes, and me and Jean are on the patio, which is where he was trying to talk to us. And I see him leave and go down the alleyway that goes back into the neighborhood. And me and Jean just looked at each other and we're like, all right, let's hit it. So we go to the other bar, and we're hanging out with everybody there because, like, everybody at my job gets off at different times.
Right.
So not everybody was out when me and Jean got down there. And then at that point, everybody was there. Everybody was at Toxic. So it was like it all worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're outside on the patio smoking because that's what we do. And so, like, we're all just kind of, like, hanging out. And me and Jean, before any of this even happened, like, we were kind of, like, trying to map out our night. And we didn't know if we wanted to go to the local gay bar or if we wanted to just, like, go out and, like, be in an actual bar, not necessarily a club setting.
Right.
And we decided that we didn't want to fuck with a club setting tonight.
Right. Sure.
So, like, while we're hanging out, Jean just kind of looks at me and she's like, do you want to go to Mask? And I was like, fuck it. And then, my coworker, one of them, came along with us. And, like, as we were leaving to go to Mask is when everything broke loose.
Okay.
So it's like, it's really weird how, like, all of it happened. Like, the timing of everything, the card, the feather, it was just, like, a whole lot to, like, take in. And, like, I don't know, we didn't really, like, understand everything that was happening until, like, we actually, like, talked about it.
Afterwards, yeah.
It was just, like, I had this weird experience with it, and, like, had Jean, like, not listened to her intuition, like, we would have been caught, like, right in the middle of it. And I honestly think that with me and Gene being, like, the last people that he talked to, like, and I don't know. It's just a really weird thing because his, I don't know if I should say sister or brother because they weren't out, but they actually came, they were trans, and he had killed them.
Yeah, he went there with his sister, from what he knew, was his sister. He went there with her and somebody else, and and he killed them. And then, like, later, like, the news was reporting this as his sister, and then later, come to find out, his sister was actually trans and identified as male. And so, I mean, it could, so maybe he had a reason to talk to you?
Yeah, it was a really weird thing. Like, I didn't know if it was, like, a trigger for him, but it was, like, us being the last people that he talked to, at least to my knowledge. Yeah. It's just a really weird thing to think about. And then also, like, how, like, me and all my friends were safe. It's kind of like a survivor's guilt, like, trying to, like, rationalize everything, trying to understand it, and, like, I don't know. Like, I'd like to think that's not the case. I'd like to think that somebody doesn't see trans people and that's their trigger to fucking kill people, whether that was their plan already or,
whatever,
like,
sure.
For that to, like, get that plan into motion, that's, like, not something great to think about. And, I've had my own feelings with that of feeling selfish for thinking that way, but being in that position, it's really weird that there was the coincidence of his relative being trans, him talking to two trans individuals before he fucking shot up the place. Like,
right. And that's just true. Seemingly right before. And it was also, I mean, were you like outside when gunshots were going on?
We were outside the whole time.
Running,
like, no, we were like
already
behind,
out of, like right out of the area.
This was like we weren't like all the bars, like, they took everybody inside. Like, we were already gone. We weren't in that area anymore. Like, we had, like, just left.
Okay.
So it was like
seconds. Probably,
if we would have stayed any longer, or like one of us had to use the restroom, like, we would have been caught in the middle of it. Now, granted, where Toxic is and where the original bar Blind Bob's is, it's at an angle. But where he came through was from behind Blind Bob's, from the neighborhood into the Oregon district. So it was like right by Ned Pepper's, and
that's what. Yeah, it was stopped at Ned Pepper. I think it was trying to get in at Ned Pepper's.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows because
he was stopped.
I think he was right. I think he was just
he was done
going. So, like, I don't even know.
I know it didn't last very long. I mean, he killed 9 people.
It was less than, I think, 60 seconds.
Yeah, but the police did a really good job reacting, and I don't know if they were already down there. They probably were. It's the Oregon district on a busy weekend, right? So it it made sense. And then the guy that was the door guy at Ned Pepper's helped apprehend him. Well, once he was shot and down, I remember he came and there's like video of him or like pictures of him like coming and taking his gun and kind of making sure that he's not going to get back up. And it was but it was pretty amazing how it brought people together. My sister, one of her friends, Lamar, his cousin Derek Fudge died in that shooting. And so it's kind of crazy that when you think about it, because Dayton's not small. Like, Dayton's not a small little Hobuck town. It's a pretty big city. And, it's crazy how everybody is still connected to this tragedy, even though only 9 people died. And so it's pretty wild that somehow in some way everybody's, got something, about it and how it has affected other people. Because I understand, because like I said, I know because I get home and, I'm supposed to be there and there's a shooting and I'm like, oh, well, intuition won again, it knew, not to go down there. And so, but it does make you feel badly because you're like, maybe I should have been, I don't know, maybe, why me? And so, I can understand that, but it is something that I'm sure you work with, and nobody can tell you how you feel about it no matter what. Nobody can. unless they're in your position as a person that was down there when it happened, as a person that talked to him when it happened, and as a person that's trans. Nobody can tell you how you feel about it. And so that's just the way that is.
Well, that whole situation, I think, was also handled poorly on parts of, like, most citizens, too, because it was like they would go into, like, the bars and restaurants down there and, like, fish for information, like, that same week. Like,
what?
Yeah,
people
it was
down there
awful.
Trying to be nosy, like, rubbernecking.
Yeah, and there was, like, news people that would try to come and, like, interview everybody, and it's like, I get it, like, but at the same time, like, it's
still very much a tragedy,
right? You have to respect people, and like.
And I remember, like, people were going off about his parents, and people were like, well, what about the parents? And it's like, you guys have to remember, the parents lost both of their children that night, both of them, and it's like, I'm sure they didn't fucking raise their kid to be a fucking shooter. I don't know what the home life was like. I don't know what the parents were like or anything like that, but. I just don't know if, that goes back to kind of that nature versus nurture thing that we talked about before. What triggered this to happen? Was it a mix of events? Did it have anything to do with his sister being trans? Nobody's going to know because he's dead and he can't tell us. So it's kind of a weird situation. I thought about, doing an episode on, like, mass shooters and things like that. Which, I don't know, maybe we will one of these days, because it is kind of wild, the different connections between all of them, like how pretty much almost all of them are always white males, and, but then they all seem to have very different reasons. Like, I would like to talk about the Aurora shooting, at some point, because that's got a lot of weird stuff to it, and, of course, Columbine and things like that, that's kind of was the original, as fucked up as it is to say, and now we have so many mass shootings that happen on a regular basis.
Well, and so many of them are considered as, like, setups, like they didn't actually.
Oh, that's
happen.
right. There's conspiracy theories to them. So eventually we'll probably go into it. But I thought it would be, good to mention that it's a very surreal moment when your governor comes down to the city and has to set up his stage on top of the blood of the victims to hold a press conference about the situation. It's pretty wild. And when it happens in an area that you're very familiar with and that you go to regularly, or that you were at, or that you should have been at, or whatever, I mean, it just really, mass shootings, it's one of those things that you don't think is ever going to happen to you until it does. And so it's just, makes you kind of have to take that step back, in life, and really appreciate the things that you have, because anything can happen at any given time. So I just thought we should, like I said, I thought we should mention that a little bit, because that's, I think, significant to most everyone here in the area. Like I said, I have yet to meet somebody that doesn't have some type of tie to it. So it's a very small world. But yeah, so that, that happened. So, okay, we'll switch gears a little bit, get off the depression train, and go back to the Flatwoods Monster. We'll go a little fun, I guess. It can be depressing too, I suppose. So, September 12th of 1952, in a little town called Flatwoods, West Virginia, 3 kids were outside, and these were like probably teenagers. They were outside playing at the local elementary school, and they saw something come out of the sky and crash into the ground. And they were like, wow, what was that? Big bright light came crashing into the ground. So they went back to one of the boys' parents' house, and they got his mom. And so the 3 boys, the mom, 2 other neighborhood kids, and a National Guardsman all went out to investigate what just happened and what's in the middle of the woods. So they all go out there, and they come upon this giant spaceship in the middle of the woods. The National Guardsman, his name was Eugene Lemon. He had a flashlight, and he was kind of pointing it around, and they all happened to see this 10-foot tall thing. And the way they described it was, like I said, it was 10 foot tall, it was huge. And it had like a glowing red face with these glowing yellow eyes. It had a green body. It had long hands, or long arms with like claw hands on it. and then it was wearing some type of cape or hood or something. And so they see this thing, and then they also there was some like crazy awful smell coming off of it. And so they see this thing, and they fucking book it out of there. They leave. They run away. And they you know, they all reported that after smelling the smell, they felt very sick. They were very nauseous and ill feeling, and you know, that's what they told people they saw. Well, they had people come out and investigate. They found the local news station found some like skid marks, some like tracks on the ground, and some type of like weird mysterious goo. And then, but of course, people have later investigated it, and they've said that, well, they probably just saw a barn owl that was on a tree, and it freaked them out. I don't really buy that story.
With a hood.
With a hood. With claw hands. I mean, no. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. And there was 7 of them in total. 7 people saw this, including a National Guardsman. You know, with a glowing red face. I don't think so. You know, and what was the smell? You know, what was that? And how do you explain the spaceship? You know, so it was a very weird incident. Since then, the town has really markets off of it a lot. It's really all they have. Again, and I've got pictures I can share with you guys. This is a very poor town. I mean, it's very sad, really, going there. It's pretty depressing. But they do have a little museum, and it is teeny tiny. They have one wall worth of stuff, and then the rest of it is just things that, you know, art people have created and things to buy and stuff like that. And then, you know, they have the tourist attraction with the chairs and things. Well, something that I didn't know about, that I learned only because I had gone to the museum, they had a drawing there, a witness drawing there, of something else that they refer to as the Frametown incident. And I'm like, okay. And I remember seeing signs of Frametown kind of around the area. Frametown is also a part of Braxton County. And on September 13th, 1952, the very next night, or actually, I think it was the same night, it was just within hours of each other. A couple was driving around the hills of West Virginia, the mountains of West Virginia, and their car stalled. And so they pulled off to the side of the road. They had their baby with them. And, you know, the guy was out working on the car, and all of a sudden they were hit with this overwhelmingly awful smell. And out of the woods comes this monster. And it's basically the same description. It's got the hood, except they describe it as like the face and stuff was very reptilian. And so it's slightly different, but it's pretty much the same thing. And again, Frametown is part of the same county. This all happened within hours of each other. You know, 2 different incidences. And I don't know why, but like I said, I've never heard of the Frametown incident. I had never heard of the Frametown monster. Didn't know that was even a thing. You know, so why aren't people talking about that one? Because then it gives some type of credence to the original story. You know, and it's just one of those things. It's like, you know, who's going to believe a bunch of hilljacks from West Virginia? All of these stories, all of these West Virginian stories are like that. They're just so strange and so bizarre. And again, the girl at the museum said that she lives beside one of the guys that originally saw it. I'm assuming he was one of the kids, and he still maintains that that's what they saw. And they don't, you know, let up on that at all. But my thing is that if you look at the Flatwoods Monster, and you compare it to Mothman, I've always said it looks like a feminine version of the Mothman. I think it does. It's got, you know, it looks very feminine. It kind of looks like a nun. And, you know, and I think it looks very feminine. Now, they do they call it Braxy. They refer to Braxy as he. But I think it's a she. And I think that, you know, obviously, because I'm making an entire documentary about it, but I think that they're definitely connected somehow. I just haven't figured out how yet. But, you know, it was a very bizarre thing. And, you know, then they took this bizarre incident and they've kind of ran with it. And it's like, you know, why? And everybody knows about the Flatwoods Monster. Everybody in this, you know, type of community knows about it. It's a very popular sighting. Some people have said, like, I've been posting the pictures of, of our weekend to social media, and like somebody was like, oh, I didn't know that they even had a museum. And it's like, right, because that was it. That was the incident. That was it. Compared to the Mothman, it happened for a year, before, they had a little bit more. They had a whole town being terrorized by this, or, the whole state being terrorized by this thing. And, with this, it was just a one-off, weird, random chance encounter. Some people said that the bright light in the sky, that it was a meteor, there was a meteor shower happening that night. And it's like, I wonder if it wasn't, whatever it was that was traveling, if it wasn't traveling maybe on a meteor, or, with the meteors for some reason. I don't know. But they've got, like, these big, replica, just, like, big, fake monsters at the museum and stuff like that. And, it's true to size, since they're 10 foot tall. And that's, you don't think 10 foot tall is very big until you're standing next to something that's 10 foot tall. And so, I don't know, that'd be pretty scary. But, I mean, that's it. That, like I said, that's it. That there was the Flatwoods Monster that night, and then also the Frametown thing happened on the same night. They're probably connected.
Well, it's like, there's only, like, one known incident of the Flatwood Monster, and then, I guess, the Frametown Monster.
Yeah.
So it's like, it really could be two separate instances
it could be
of the same thing.
Right. Them seeing the same thing.
Does one, conclude that the other happened, or are they actually two separate events that kind of just so happen to be close to one another?
Well, and I could almost bet you anything that if I were to look into UFO sightings that night, there'd be a bunch in that area.
Yeah.
Because that is how these things, typically happen, is that, people see these clusters of sightings. It happened with the Injured Cold that happened. People, there was a big cluster of UFO sightings when Injured Cold landed down and had that conversation with Woody. And, so it's, they're all, that's just giving it more evidence to say that it definitely happened. I mean, it's weird, and if that was the case, and say it was the same monster, say they're both the same monster, which is what is implied here. Well, because what else would it be? These towns are literally right next to each other. What the fuck is it doing in our woods? What was it doing out there? Because both instances, it was in the woods. The Flatwoods Monster, happened right behind but also still close to the highway, or close to civilization rather, but still in the woods. That happened, Flatwoods happened across from the elementary school. And, the Frametown Monster happened basically on the side of the road. What was it doing out there? But it was coming for, I know in the Frametown one, it started chasing after them. And I don't know if it started, I think it did in the Braxy encounter. Braxy started moving towards them. And they all took off and ran. So, like, was it what would have happened when it caught up? Was it going to take
Right, was it trying to be their friend? Like, oh, come back, be my
friend. Hi. Probably, yeah. Come on in. Opens up the spaceship. Well, come on in. Probably. I don't know. Who knows? Was it trying to make contact with us? And I guess I could see why it would land in the wood. That was another thing. The town, we were driving around looking for these chairs, and there was just this random landing strip in the middle of nowhere. And that's another thing, another lead that I need to follow and figure out, what the fuck is this thing? What do they use this for? Because it's abandoned. It's in the middle of nothing and nowhere. But that's not where the Flatwoods Monster was. But still.
Is there like a farm or anything around there?
Well, probably, I'm sure.
Because a lot of times farms have stuff
for crop dusting. Oh, that's true.
For crop dusting.
Yeah, that's very true. That's it could be. I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but it looked pretty well abandoned. It was like in the middle of the woods, and but then there are farms around there, but for the most part, Sutton. Well, okay, I keep calling it different names. I'll just say Braxton County is basically built into the side of a mountain, and so it's not a lot of oddly enough, even though it's called Flatwoods, it's not a lot of flat land. It's actually all pretty. I mean, it's pretty elevated, and, you know, up and down. So, but it could be. I don't know. Like I said, I'm gonna research it and see what that area was. Well, I'll probably put Anne on it because that's her thing. Anne has she's starting to become more comfortable with being the co-host of the documentary. First she was talking about it and she's like, I'm invested, I don't want to co-host. She's like, well, I don't want to be on camera. And I'm like, well, Anne, you're going to have to be on camera at some point if you're going to be here doing all this. And she's just like, well, okay, well, I just got to get used to it. And so I'm slowly kind of moving her into the spot. But anyway, she was so excited to go hunt for those chairs. She was so happy to get her sticker. We all got our stickers, by the way. Anyway, so, but yeah, I mean, what could it have been doing in the middle of West Virginia? I mean, it could have been maybe cultivating different species, just kind of getting wildlife, and it just so happened to come upon humans, and it's like, oh, you know.
Well, I mean, if you are some interdimensional being, an alien of some sort, you're not just going to want to fucking plop down anywhere. You know, you're going to want to go to like, some place that's a little bit more isolated, and then like within that isolated place, go somewhere that's even more isolated within that isolated place.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. Well, and it would make sense for it to come in during a meteor shower, like I said, because then when you do see weird lights in the sky and stuff, you would just assume that it's a meteor. You know, it'd be pretty unassuming. You'd be like, oh, okay. You know, but then it comes down. Obviously, it came down for some type of reason. I mean, again, they didn't stop to talk to it. I don't know what I would do in that situation, you know, because the chances of them having, at least as far as I know, none of them have ever had any type of incident like that again for their entire lives. And so it's like, you know, if that was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, would you stop and try to communicate with it?
Take me with you.
Please. I hate it here.
Help me, Daddy.
Yeah. You know, I mean, hey, it's 10 foot tall. I'm sure it's got a big dick. I'm just saying. But no, yeah, I mean, obviously it was here for something, and on a mission of some sorts, it seems like, because it was here. And well, then they didn't really say like if it left right afterwards. I mean, maybe it hung out in the woods and was like, okay, you'll be back
by myself.
Right, I'll just wait for you. You know, what did it do? And I don't think the Frametown incident, they didn't report a spaceship like they did in the Flatwoods incident. They just reported the actual, you know, alien itself or monster, whatever, and that was it. And so it's like, could it have walked through the woods, like, and just been exploring the area, or probably looking for its friends that it just made? And then it's like, oh, there you are. I don't know. You know, but they all give basically the same accounts. Like I said, they do look slightly different, but it could be a matter of lighting, you know, which is why they saw something different. It could be, you know, a matter of, you know, if you see something like that, you know, John Keel says, you don't really know, well, he doesn't say exactly like this, but you don't really know what the fuck you're seeing.
Right.
You know, your brain is not processing.
Pull in so much information. And
right.
Your brain tends to fill in the blanks.
Right.
So it's like, one person might see the same thing, but like notice different things.
Right, about that thing. And it's like, you know, and that's what he says. That's why most things go underreported, because your mind will fill in the blanks for what you saw. And usually it'll come up with something that you already know or you're familiar with, because that's what you know and you're familiar with, you know. It could be traumatizing to see something like that, because then that just totally, you know, gosh, if aliens are real, you know, it just fucks with your reality, you know. And so
especially with like certain belief systems,
right,
or, like, even a lack thereof, it just be kind of like, holy fuck, like, there's
exactly
things, like,
you know, it just, so I mean, so and then in trauma, I mean, gosh, we do weird things during a traumatizing situation. We react very oddly, and then it's a very personal experience to how you're going to react to a trauma. And so it's, you know, so I could see the discrepancies in the description, but I feel like it was close enough. And then the one thing that everybody described was that same smell, that weird, horrible, awful smell. And you know, I don't know. I wonder why it smelled so bad. I mean, Well, why was it so stinky?
I mean, it could have been from the spaceship.
It could have been from the ship. Just the gas is coming off the ship, and they all say that.
Do they have gasoline where they are? Or,
and they all talk about like that kind of sulfur type smell, and it's like. But one thing I did notice about West Virginia is that you do hit spots that are. I mean, it's pretty overwhelming. Like, people, you drive by a waste management plant or whatever, and it stinks, but, like, sometimes it's pretty powerful, and it's like, so I wonder if it's not just the area, but they were all pretty certain that it was coming off of the creature itself. And I think it was even yelling or screeching or something at the in the Frametown incident, or maybe it wasn't, but they had a baby with them, the baby started crying, and, maybe they just thought that the baby was it making noises. I don't know. It's all a very strange and unusual type of situation. You usually don't have people, you don't have that many people see the same thing at one time, usually it's a couple of them or whatever. But the more people that you have see, and that's why I like to take a lot of people with me working on the documentary. I prefer to have more people, because then when something does happen, I've got all of those witnesses that saw it. Right. And so, just like when it was just me and Ann and we saw the ghost deer, it was just me and Ann. And so, like, between the two of us, we couldn't be like, oh, well, but, we went back and we looked this last weekend when we were there at that area, and it's not possible that it wasn't a ghost deer. She's still kind of in denial of it. And I'm like, Ann, it's a ghost deer. We saw a ghost deer, just accept that. And but anyway, yeah, I mean, having the multiple accounts helps. So that's why I like to take people with me, because then when you have more people that all say the same thing, that's why the Scarberry sighting with the Mothman is so important, is because there was 4 of them and they all gave the same story in different settings and different rooms, and they've all maintained that story forever. Nobody's ever been like, no. Same thing with the Flatwoods Monster. Again, obviously, the one guy still says that that's what he saw. And I'm definitely going to try to get him for an interview and get him to talk about what it was he saw, because they all have a slightly different perspective, but it's pretty much the same thing, So, I don't know. That's basically the Flatwoods Monster. It's just a very simple, very random encounter, and I know a lot of people haven't heard about the Frametown incident. So I was kind of excited to share that, because again, I had never heard of it. Had never even knew. All these years of researching this kind of stuff, and the Flatwoods Monster, it's fascinating to me, because that's scary to me, because again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm fucking terrified of aliens. So I would be really scared if that happened. But I had never heard of the Frametown thing. And it's actually one of those things that's really hard to find. I've been trying to kind of Google it, and there's not really much information about it, because it was just a very cut and dry thing. It was a Fortean investigator. It was the one that got the account from the original people. I don't even think we know their names. I think they remain anonymous. But yeah, it's you can't find much about it. Now, if you Google Braxy and Flatwoods Monster, you'll get 10,000 articles about the incident, which is weird, because again, look at us, we're in here, 45 minutes into the podcast, and that's it. There's nothing else to say. But then none of them mentioned that other event that was happening at the same time. So it's like, why not? Because then it adds credibility to the story. Is that why it's been buried? Because then you'd have people actually think that this might be a real thing and not just a fake account that's now, that the town is now making money off of. Because it kind of seems to be the theme of West Virginia, is that they'll have like some weird monster. And then they'll have a museum, and then they'll have events, and they'll make it really touristy and really fun and really gimmicky. And so it's like, but if you do that, then it kind of takes away that credibility of the original story. And so if the government knows that we know, and then they allow us to do those touristy, big, flashy show things, then they know that we're taking away credibility from it, so people aren't really gonna pay much attention to it like that, I think. Or they're gonna be like, oh yeah, I believe in it just because it's fun to believe in it. And, you know, it's the cool thing to do. And so, you know, I don't know. But...
Well, and I mean, it could just be, you know, like, different cities have different police departments. It could have been the way that each situation might have been handled depending on who the people talk to. It could have been two completely different, you know, agencies, whether it was police or news reporters, whatever they... Because, I mean, like, who do you call?
Ghostbusters.
You know, like, in that moment, though, it's like,
who do you call?
Do I call the police about this? Like,
that's true. You don't even know who to report to. That's a good point.
So,
and I think that's why a lot of it goes underreported. Who knows who saw what else that night? And it was the 1950s. It's not like they jumped on their Facebook and was like, "We just saw this thing," you know. You know, it's not. We don't do that shit anymore. You know, they didn't do that shit back then. You know, that's true. That's true. They wouldn't know who to go to. I think the reason why it got so big with in Flatwoods was because it was a National Guardsman. Right. I can't buy into the story that it was an owl. I just can't. You can't tell me that out of all 7 of them, not one of those motherfucker knows what an owl looks like.
And it's 10 foot tall.
Right. Well, they said it could have been the owl was on the branch of the tree and you could see its legs.
Okay, but then what about the rest of it?
And what about the glowing
it would just be
eyes, or the glowing red head, and the glowing yellow eyes, and the green glowing body, and the spaceship? Was it the owl's spaceship too? You know, what about the goo? Nobody collected it. Nobody thought to collect the goo and figure out what the fuck it was. You know, or maybe they
did.
Yeah. Well, I know,
kept it a secret.
Some local somebody was driving around that area looking for evidence, and you know, I think one of the explanations they came up with was that it was oil that had come off the car, and it's like, oil is not goo.
Right. And if it is, you've probably never, ever gotten an oil change.
Never.
And your car
right.
shouldn't be running.
Right. And it's like, yeah. You know, so and why not? Why not take it and test it? Or, you know, gosh, we were talking about, like, the DNA testing and shit that you could do now. Like, if we had a sample of that now, it would have been great for us to be able to use as reference and go back and test and see what the fuck it is. But nobody ever did anything with it. And it's just wild to me that they didn't follow that lead. That's so frustrating. That's so frustrating. So...
Well, girl, now we know if we see anything,
we need to take a sample of that goo.
Right. We need to...
Would you taste it?
Approach it. It could be friendly.
I'm and if not, scared.
Oh well, what a way to go out.
If this is how I die, I die.
Right.
At least I know now that they're real.
Right. And then 2, if there's anything that can be collected, collect it and hold on to it. Be mindful of who we call because we don't know who to call.
You can't call Ghostbusters. Yeah, you're right.
So
I guess people call me. If you guys have some type of incident, call me and and I will come collect all the goo and test it, and we'll figure out what it was. Or better yet, if I can't handle it, I know somebody that can. Do you know who I'm talking about? You know who can handle it. Karen, girl.
Gotta get Karen on the case.
We'll get Karen on that case. That's who you gotta call. You gotta call Karen. She will figure it out. She will get to the bottom of it. She's not messing around.
It doesn't have to be any specific Karen. Just type
any
in Karen in your contacts. Right. The first one, call
her. Call Karen and tell her. It doesn't have to be any specific one. Oh my gosh. Yeah, just call Karen and she'll come out. She'll make sure they get that goo. She wants to know what's in that goo. And she'll figure it out. But yeah, it was handled pretty well. Actually, that situation was, but then again, there was things that they didn't do, like testing the goo and stuff like that didn't make any sense. And then the underreporting of the Frametown incident as well. So I don't know, but that's basically, like I said again, that's it. That's a Flatwoods Monster, and somehow this is all connected to the Mothman, and I am going to figure out how they're related, because I think they definitely are. And it's even weird, like when you pull up the Wikipedia for the Flatwoods Monster, the suggested pages are for the Mothman, and then it's also for the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins. and those are associated. But it's kind of weird because West Virginia's got more than that. It's got the Grafton Monster. I think they have a bat squatch out there. They've got a dog man. I mean, they've got tons of other things that you could talk about. But of course, the ones that it suggests are the ones that seem to have some type of direct connection to each other. And so, I don't know what it is yet, but I'm so excited to find out. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, if there's any other incident you guys can think of, any other tie, have you guys heard of the Frametown Monster? Do you know anything about it? Do you know anything about UFO reports at the time? Send it to me. Let me know, because I'm probably going to try to look into it anyway. But it's hard, I was reading Greg Newkirk had shared something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was about like Googling these incidences, and it's like, and he said, the reason why you can't find this kind of stuff out is because this isn't stuff that you can just Google. Like, this is stuff that, like, you've got to read books, and you've got to go out and you got to go out to these places and talk to the locals and hear their stories and hear their takes on it. And that lady Kathy that we talked to, she was talking about how, like, she was talking about the mansion house there and about the history of it. And she says, she's really happy because it's got so much history to it that they don't even know what all of it is. And, she says that a lot of young people aren't really into history anymore. And, like, because of that, it's all just kind of being erased. And then the only history that we really have is from word of mouth. And eventually those people, like she was talking about the Daughters of the Revolution and how, a lot of their stories are from word of mouth. And, those women are dying and most of them are gone now. I think all of them are gone now. But even like the family lines are dying off and nobody knows what it is. And, so we were talking about how that relates back to the documentary, because she was more than happy to talk about the documentary and stuff. And, she's saying that, a lot of that stuff is just going to kind of be gone. A lot of those little tidbits, like, well, the Frametown incident, nobody was talking about it then. Nobody's talking about it now. One of these days, it's just not going to exist anymore. And so it's my job to make sure that it does.
Well, not everything is going to be on Google.
Right. Not everything is.
There's a lot of shit in this world, and there's a lot of shit on Google. But not everything's going to be there, yeah. And so a lot of the stuff you have to get out there and do your own footwork on and, really find and dig for. So, that's kind of where we're at. That's what Anne's trying to do. And she's trying to find the history of the railway system, because there is none. And it's like, at least not on Google. You can't find it anywhere on Google. So we're trying to take a different avenue to figure out why would it be on Google?
Yeah.
It's... There, you could think of some reasons as to why it wouldn't be on Google.
Yeah.
But, like, what purpose would it serve being on Google?
There. Right.
Unless somebody was actually...
Not everything's been translated.
Right.
Well, just like, John Keel.
Not everything seems important.
He talks about all this stuff all the time. And, like, one thing he talks about is this, like, weird, mysterious floating tin can thing. And you're not gonna find that shit on Google. Like, that's, I don't remember the whole story about it, but it's just just another bizarre Fortean phenomena, and it's not on Google.
Well, I mean, if you think of it, just think of like Google as, let's just say, a textbook. Like, even in history class, like, you have a textbook on history. Not everything is going to be in that book.
Yeah.
Because one, it can only be so big, but there's only so much that, people will feel is important.
Yeah.
And that's why there's historians that write books on different events that go into much deeper detail. So there's a lot of things that are just omitted because there's not enough room or time, attention to put into it. So it's like, what person is really going to go out of their way to just like, oh, I need to put this on Google. Like,
if you're not actively doing it.
An online source for this that Google can find.
Right.
Like, it's
different.
weird.
Yeah, it is weird. So I'm excited to talk to the people of Point Pleasant and go down to the winery and talk to those people and, learn about their history and stuff straight from the source, because they're going to know. They're going to know more than I can ever find out, And so we'll see what happens. Hopefully you know, haven't found the Mothman yet, but soon. Anyway, got anything else to add in this week, or?
Not really.
Yeah, I think we're good. Well, we'll probably update you guys with our weekend adventure from next weekend. For this next weekend, Ivy's supposed to go with me, so we'll see how that rolls, and I'm hoping to do some really fun witchy stuff down there. So it'll be a lot. So we'll see how it goes. All right, guys. Well, I'll talk to you next Wednesday. Bye.
Bye.